Okay, let's take a look at the box office from this past weekend. So total domestic box office was about 72 million for the weekend, which was about a quarter drop. Again, I've been saying this over and over. We're in this weird in-between stage where we're not really going to see... I mean, I don't think we're going to see any other huge movies coming out this year. I think we peaked with Deadpool and Wolverine. The only thing that could match something like that would be like a Moana 2. But I'm very bearish on that movie's critical or financial success. Well, financial, I don't know, because the brand is so strong because of things like Disney Plus. But I'm just not super hopeful about that. I don't see that becoming like this like huge success story the way so many other films this year have kind of surprisingly become. And I think it's telling the state of the box office that the first new movie in the top 10 is all the way at number 5, right? So it barely squeaked into the top 5 here. Speaking of here, it's called Here. This is its first weekend, bringing in just about $5 million, which just barely brought it into the projections I had for it, around 5 to 8 million. For those of you who say my predictions are always wrong, I was just barely right. Here, if you don't know about this is a Robert Zemeckis film, of course, you know, the director of many classic films like Back to the Future, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Forrest Gump. So he has a lot of, I guess, kind of like cultural or he has like a lot of capital, so to speak. He's clearly, he hasn't really made like a really good or great film in years, but Hollywood just seems to like him, and people like greenlighting films of his and financing them and producing them. This is a kind of interesting concept. The film is like this shot you see down like at the bottom banner here. It's basically a film all from one angle, but it's like cutting between like different points in time, kind of linearly, like, and kind of is charting the course of like this relationship between the Tom Hanks and Robin Wright character. So you see here in this picture down below, or I guess it's to my left, that they're like de-aged. It's like a deep fake. And so it kind of seems like an interesting idea. I saw the trailer and it looked fine. And the reviews haven't been particularly great. And you know, yes, it met the projections, but again, projections aren't necessarily always a measure of success, because the projections might take into account that it's going to underperform in a sense, right? Because if you look at the budget, this was made for, you know, almost $50 million. And on its opening weekend, it only made 5. And this was not a limited release. This was in over, you know, 2,600 theaters. So I'd be very surprised if this film even matches its budget, let alone doubling it to become like an actually profitable film. But you know, it's something I could see doing well on streaming for like middle-aged white people who just like want something on it. It's like, oh, it's a kind of a sweet thing, and I like Tom Hanks and Robin Wright. It's kind of like a de facto Forrest Gump reunion of sorts. And then 2 other films opening this weekend are 2 Bollywood films. And please forgive me, I just know they're Indian films, and I don't know if that's correct to say that it's, you know, just because it's an Indian film, it's Bollywood. But from my understanding, these are 2 Bollywood films. At number 8, we have, I'm going to mispronounce this, Bhoolaiyaa 3. So it's the 3rd film in the Bhoolaiyaa franchise. Only brought in a little over $2 million. Just barely a wide release, around between 700 and 800 theaters. But it's already been playing, presumably just in India, but at least outside the United States. So it's already brought in worldwide now, close to $20 million off of like an almost $18 million budget. So, and of course this is all in rupees. I had to do like the conversions, for your convenience here. So it's, you know, it's made back that budget, but it still has a little bit of a way to go. The other Bollywood film here at number 9, Singham Again, or Singham, bringing in just a little over 2 million, kind of similar, almost same amount of theaters, though it's made more worldwide at like that 22.4 million, but it cost way more. It's like a $43 million movie. So right now that's in the red. And seeing as how low they are in the top 10. I'd be surprised if they're still here next weekend. But I'm also it's not like we're gonna have a bunch of huge films open next weekend, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But again, it's always interesting to see when international films, especially non-English international films, kind of break into the top 10. And usually it's a sign of kind of what else is going on in the American box office in terms of, or maybe better put, what's not happening in the American box office. Continuing into its second weekend, holding its first place spot is Venom 3, Venom: The Last Dance, bringing just a little over $26 million for the weekend. This did not get good reviews. The thing with the other two Venom movies was there was this kind of like so bad it's good appreciation for them, I think, in a lot of ways. But it seems like fans of the last two didn't really care for this one that much. It's not like this abhorrent, offensive departure for the franchise. It's just like meh. It's just even people who liked the other ones are just kind of whatever about it. It did have the best per theater average of the weekend at around $6,300 per theater. And notably, it didn't have a huge drop. A 48.8%. So like a nearly 50% drop is not good at all. But it is not catastrophic the way what have we seen here with some films, like something like Joker 2 had an 80% drop or something, right? So this is decent, and so far, so at this point, it's essentially a profitable quote unquote movie, right? So its worldwide total is over $300 million. It was only made for 120, so I would classify this as a minor success. I feel like I gotta like codify these terms because I'm always saying different things. But I feel like when it comes to something like as like a success, there's like minor, moderate, and major success, right? And then you can keep going up from major, but major's usually where something stops. Right now this is a minor success. It's barely doubled its budget. And will it continue going forward? I don't know. As people like to make fun of me for on this show, I like to say, is it gonna have legs, right? Right now, it's only in its second weekend, so we can't really get a good sense of that. It'll really depend on how big of drops it has third weekend, fourth weekend, and so on and so forth. Also continuing in its second weekend is Conclave, the kind of religious political thriller about the election of a new pope, holding its fourth place spot in its second weekend, bringing in about $5.3 million, only a 19.7% drop. Which is really good, really, really good. And of course, it's easy to have not as big of a drop when you, didn't make that much money. Like, I think, what was it? Last weekend it made around $6.5 million. So, but this is still really good, right? It's been getting really good reviews. It actually added 43 theaters, which I'm sure helped. And I've actually, I saw it. I released my review for it last week on cinemancqso.substack.com. I thought it was great. I'm definitely like the perfect Venn diagram for this movie as someone who is both considers myself fairly, Catholic in terms of my upbringing as well as my current belief system. But at the same time, I consider myself very, very left leaning, right? So this film, and I'm willing to interrogate my faith and my beliefs. So I'm like the exact cross section of this movie's like what this movie has to offer. It'll be interesting to see. There's been like awards buzz about it, but I'm not sure if that will continue into actually into 2025 when election season, Freudian slip, award season really starts to solidify like what films are kind of in the front of the pack. This brings its worldwide total to about 15 million, but still off a $20 million budget. So as of right now, it's still in the red. But again, even if it were to stop playing in every theater today, and that was the final amount of money it made, films like this are not really only about the box office. They, of course, are about the awards and the prestige. Looking here, still in the top 5, we have The Wild Robot, actually jumping up a spot. So it was in third place last week. It actually went up to second in its 6th weekend. bringing in just about 7.5 million, and this actually had a 10% jump, which is great, even though it lost almost 200 theaters. This is a film that did not open very big, but the intention was always to have a slow and steady wins the race approach, to make back that budget. And so far the legs, have been very, if we're talking about human legs, the legs have been very sexy, right? So it's, domestically it's brought in like 121 million. And it opened around 36 million. So if you look at that domestic multiple column, this is basically a measure of how much of the domestic box office, like what's the ratio between the total versus the opening weekend amount. So ideally you want this domestic multiple number to be higher, because that means that you're making more of your money over time and you're not just front loading it, right? This means that there's good word of mouth and people are coming back to it. And this brings its worldwide total to around 269 million off of a $78-ish million budget. So again, I would classify this as a moderate, decent success so far. It couldn't happen to a better film. It's a really, really great piece of animation. So conversely, Wild Robot, like we said, jumped a spot. So of course that means something had to swap with it. So Smile 2 dropped from second to third place. Now in its third weekend, made just a little under $7 million. I'm going to be curious with all these like horror leaning films here. Seeing as this last weekend, even though it's past Halloween, it was kind of, the last little squeeze that cinemas could get out of, the Halloween spooky season. So I'm going to be very interested to see what the drops are for something like Smile 2 next weekend. But this wasn't an awful drop, despite losing its spot to Wild Robot. It was only like a 29% drop. This brings its domestic total to around 53 million. Its worldwide total to about 110 million off of just a $28 million budget. So this is, well above, but now that I'm looking at it, that doesn't seem right, does it? Yes, it does. Okay. I'm like, the math doesn't seem to be mathing there. But yeah, so it's a pretty good success. The films like this and horror films are always a good bet because they're, they can only be so expensive, right? Like, they're not going to have these giant visual spectacles the way like an Avengers movie will. So at a certain point, unless you're talking about salaries, for like actors or like really popular directors, there's like a ceiling to how expensive a horror film can be, right? So the idea with a lot of horror films is make them as cheap as possible, and if they do moderately well in terms of the actual gross box office, that percent return is really, really strong. And we see that here bright as day with Terrifier 3 dropping from 6th to 7th place in its 4th frame. So about a month in, only brought in about $3 million here, but not a huge drop, only about 32%. But look at that percent return, right? So worldwide, it's made like $64 million. As far as I could tell from from my research, it was only made for like $2 million. So this is by far, I've been doing this show for almost a year now. I started in February of 2024. Of all the weekends I have analyzed in terms of the box office, this might be the best percent return that I've ever seen doing the show. Over 3,000% return. So for every dollar they spent, they had this huge multiple. And again, it just goes to show how valuable cheap horror films, when marketed really well, how valuable they can be. Also, just want to say quickly one last time, it seems like it's probably going to be the last time we're going to talk about this. Beetlejuice dropping from 7th to 10th place in its 9th frame. So I think I said this last week, but it bears repeating. I believe this is now Warner Brothers' highest grossing domestic film of the year, even surpassing Dune Part 2. Though I think Dune Part 2 is beating it when you take in the worldwide box office. But it only brought in about a little over 2 million. But again, this is like a moderate success here. This is something I did not expect to do very well. I just didn't feel the Beetlejuice brand was iconic enough or strong enough today and had enough fans and loyalty today to really make a massive impact. But I would be shocked if Warner Brothers is not trying to find a way to convince Michael Keaton and Tim Burton, and whoever else they can, to make, Beetlejuice, like make the third one. Because it's so far now worldwide, it's made about $445 million off of just $100 million budget. So this is definitely, has turned out very successful for Warner Brothers, even though the film was good but not great. And then looking ahead to this upcoming weekend, we have, speaking of horror films, we have the horror thriller Heretic, starring Hugh Grant, as you see here. Basically, the premise is these two Mormon girls are going door to door, ask people about Jesus and whatever, and they go to his door and he invites them in, and then it turns into this weird, almost like Saw-esque, like you have to choose to test your faith and all this stuff. So the trailer seems interesting. It's gotten decent reviews. I think I'm going to see it next weekend, so I'm excited. Next week, sometime in the middle of the week. Only projected to make about 10 to 13 million. So again, it's not going to have this huge box office gross, but again, it'll be, what is it compared to the budget, and how long can it sustain itself? We'll also have, I forgot to add the numbers here. I apologize. The numbers should be 8 to 11 million. This is the best Christmas pageant ever. It's based off of a children's book about a town with some really naughty kids in it, and the mom of this family here, played by Judy Greer, decides to have the really naughty kids be part of the town's Christmas pageant. The trailers seem kind of heartwarming, but I'm not sure how good it's gonna be. It's kind of like Christian film adjacent. Like, the film doesn't seem to be super propagandic in any way, but it is still has its roots. The studio, I think, is Affirm Films or whatever it is, or Angel Studios. So again, not super big, but maybe it will kind of have some holding power as we move into the more Christmassy season, which some would argue has already started. And then we'll also have an anime film, Overlord: The Sacred Kingdom. This is something I know nothing about. I assume it is related to an anime. If someone in the comments knows better than I, please let me know. It's only projected to make about 3 to 6 million for the weekend. Again, films like this, I would have to look into this. I will for next weekend, but I would imagine this has already been playing in places like Japan. So whenever you open it in the United States, it's just to make any little extra cash that you can. Maybe keep the brand alive or introduce the brand to new audiences. Wow, what an interesting story. I'm sure you have some thoughts about the topic, so comment below, let me know what you think. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really, really helps people find the channel and makes me feel all warm inside. Until next time, I'm Peter Mancuso. Peace out.